Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. My name's Martin Lee. I'm also part of Talos. I have the pleasure of managing the Talos outreach team within EMEA. A little bit about me. I've worked in security now for almost 17 years. For the past 4 years, managing the Talos outreach team across Europe. Before that, I was working here in Belfast for Alert Logic. Prior to that, I was also at Cisco. You can't really escape Cisco. They're a bit like the mafia. Once you've worked for them, they pull you back in eventually. And then for many years before that, I worked for Message Labs in Gloucester, detecting threats coming in over email. I am a very keen, if not particularly fast, or indeed in any way talented runner, but I do enjoy it. And when I'm not hunting threats, I tend to be out into the hills running. And I'm also a recycled human viral geneticist. I started my career researching the genetics of human viruses before basically by accident ending up in security. But I'm very glad that I'm here. As a sponsor of the conference, you have one obligatory semi-marketing slide, which is what we do in Cisco Talos. We are Cisco's threat intelligence and security research organization. So what we do in the wider group is follow the telemetry and the intelligence and the information that we have about what's happening in the threat landscape, understanding what the bad guys are up to and what those attacks look like, and then using that information to power Cisco's security product offering so that we can protect customers against the threats that are out there. But in order to protect against these threats, you actually have to understand what's happening, and most importantly, be able to spot what is new, what is different, and what you actually need to concentrate on and understand how the threat landscape's shifting. And this is what we specialize in as part of the outreach team. What we do is work on analyzing the intelligence that we've got, spotting what is different, and understanding that. And we've actually been very, very successful in what we do. Earl and Edmund have just talked about Sea Turtle. So here we have a nation-state threat actor undermining one of the fundamental protocols that allows the internet to function. We also we identified VPN filter. This was a network of 500,000 compromised small office, home office routers across the globe that were poised to launch a giant attack. We don't know what that attack was because we managed to stop that attack before it happened, working with our partners in the public sector to take down the command and control networks of the threat actor so they couldn't launch an attack. And there's a load of other stuff that we found. We found various rats, remote access Trojans. We've also identified a previously unknown APT group, which is particularly interested about the Korean Peninsula. And we're also identified Bad Rabbit, which is a criminal ransomware that appears to have been derived from the same source code that was used in NotPetya, which is also quite an interesting observation. So not only are we finding these very, very interesting things first, I'm also incredibly proud to say that we're an award-winning team. SE magazine recognized us as having found the most important cybersecurity discovery by a company research team this year. And Paul, who's in the audience, and Warren were the recipients of the Peter Saw Award from Virus Bulletin for their research on Sea Turtle this year. So I like to think this is evidence that we're doing something right. The trick is, well, what are we actually doing? And what is special about what we do and how we operate that allows us to find this? I think, to be fair, what we do has more or less happened by accident. There hasn't been a grand plan that we've been trying to implement. There is no manual out there of how to manage or how to make function a threat research or a threat intelligence team. But I do get out and get to talk to an awful lot of organizations that are trying to do the same thing as us. Many of them less successful, and some of them, to be fair, have basically failed in creating a threat intelligence team. So it's very interesting to compare what it is that we do with other organizations, and also especially those that really haven't managed to get such a team functioning. And I think it really starts with these assumptions of how do you actually go out and hunt threats. Naively, people tend to think it's like some kind of sausage machine, and you put in at the top data, lots and lots of data, a big dollop of data. You mix that in with some tools, probably a SIEM solution, because that gives you a nice dashboard, and then you've got some kind of procedures that are carved in stone, that are rigid, and what it is that you have to do. You turn this handle of the sausage machine and you find threats coming out of it. In fact, no, this is absolutely not what we do. The way that we function is more to think about threat hunting as a stack of technology. We certainly need data. We need, data forms the hunting ground in which you're going to hunt threats. This data can come from many sources. It can be internal, coming off your own networks, from your own telemetry, from your own visibility of what's happening on the internet. It can also come from external sources, both the private and public sources that you can tap into, that anyone can use to hunt threats. As I said, Sea Turtle, we are primarily identified through passive DNS, which is available to anyone, and also through VirusTotal, which again is available to anyone. So you don't necessarily need this secret magic store of data which only you can access. You certainly need some kind of tooling. This is quite, in my opinion, quite a narrow and thin layer within this stack. We need some way that we can ask questions of the data and get back answers. But far, far more important than that tooling is actually having the right people, having people with the right skills, and most importantly, the right attitude in order to hunt threats. And those people thrive in the right culture. You can absolutely kill the best people with the right tooling in the right data environment if you have the wrong culture. This culture piece, I cannot emphasize just how important it is to enable and encourage people to hunt threats. We'll come to that in a moment. And then also there's this very, very thin layer on top, which is kind of the management bit, which is that strategy. We need to have some kind of direction, but realistically, this is a very, very small part of the mix. That strategy, for me, fundamentally, is just two questions. You've got to have some idea of what it is that you want to find. If you have no idea what it is that you're looking for, you will never find it. But if you have at least some goal, this is the type of thing that we're looking for, then you stand a chance to be able to find it or to recognize it when you stumble across it. There's also this other piece. What are you going to do when you find it? It's all very, well and good finding things, maybe finding that your network has been penetrated by a criminal hacker or an APT gang, but unless you actually have a plan what it is that you're going to do once you find this, then, well, you might as well not have bothered. If you can't resolve it, if you can't do something with it, then really, what was the point in looking and finding something? For us, I think these questions actually have very, very clear answers. What it is that we do in our team, we are looking for the most significant new threats that are happening on the internet. We see our role within Talos of we're the guys that protect the entire internet. We're looking out for everyone that's on the internet. We want to hunt down and find the bad guys, find the new things that they are doing, be the first people that find these things, so that we can protect our customers and protect the internet as a whole, and also, most importantly, inform the community, inform everyone. You know, if you don't know what the bad guys are doing, then you won't know that actually you need to protect yourself against this. So actually being public, talking about the threats, talking about how that threat landscape is changing and what you need to do to protect yourself against that is a very, very key part of what we do, and this is ultimately what it is that we're trying to achieve. To find these threats, we need to adapt the intelligence cycle. So this is something that's come out of military intelligence since the Second World War, when the military was faced with the problem, how on earth do you get soldiers to the right place on the battleground where the enemy actually is? In a lot of cases in the Second World War, you've got groups of soldiers, entire regiments wandering around trying to find the enemy. And when they get there where they think the enemy is, the enemy's actually moved on. And so over the past 70, 80 years or so, we've had this maturation in the intelligence community of trying to define what intelligence is and how it acts. And it starts at that bit at the top with a planning and direction. Firstly, it starts with just a question. You know, what is it that we're hoping to find? What is it that we are looking for? And then to go out and find the data that could actually support the question that it is that we're trying to ask. So we're starting with a question, what are we looking to find? We need to have the data to which we can ask that question so we can get out a response. In the world of IT, very, very quickly, I mean, you can all come up with some very, very good questions that you'd like to ask your network and your systems and your users about what a particular threat might look like on it. But when you start asking those questions and start looking for the data, almost certainly you will find that the data that you have doesn't actually allow you to get an answer for that question that you would like. And so to begin with, we go through an iterative process. We'd like to ask this question, but actually we just don't have the data to ask that. Nevertheless, in looking at this data, we can find that, yeah, there are actually quite interesting questions that we could ask of it nevertheless, which are kind of similar to that question that we started with. So we have this process at the beginning of going back and forth, looking at the data that we have, thinking about the questions that we'd like to ask, until we come to an interesting question that's relevant, that's going to be useful, and we have the data that can support that. And then we go out and we collect that data, we process it, we collect in various different sources, analyze that to understand what it is that we found, what's the context, how does this fit, what can we actually do with this, and then in our case, disseminate that, get that information to the people to whom it is useful. But the magic really happens in that processing and analysis and data collection part. And there's a number of techniques that we can use to make sense of the data that we have. The typical bit is really just classical engineering. As engineers, we love to have repeatable and predictable processes with nice defined inputs and outputs, and we can put something in at the beginning, we can follow some nice procedure and come out to a nice predictable end where we have a nice clean answer to the question that we answered. This is great. This is really the holy grail of what we want to get to. A very good example of that in a typical type of thing that you'll find in a threat hunting team, a new threat intelligence report will come out. It'll have indicators of compromise within that. A very, very sensible question to start with is, okay, in my system, in my environment, have we been hit by this? Do we have these indicators of compromise within our systems? And so we kick off this nice, predictable, repeatable process. We will look through the data that we have. We will look to see whether we've got these indicators of compromise, and we will come out with a nice, clean yes, no at the end of it. Lovely. People do this time and time again, and they tend to come out with the answer no. Why? Well, because within the report, you're just going to have one set of IOCs for one particular attack. And if the attacker has changed a single byte in his malware, you're going to have a different hash value. The attacker may well be using a different domain, a slightly different IP address when he's attacking you. So actually, if you're only looking for IOCs that are published elsewhere within your data, to be honest, you're unlikely to find anything. You might be lucky, but probably not. I think the question that you should be asking is, what might such an attack look like within our environment? So we're not specifically asking the indexes, have you seen this? We're thinking, well, if such an attack happened, what traces would it leave in the data that we have, that we could look for? And this process is actually something that's quite different. It's a very innovative process. We have to think about our system, our environment, our data. What might those traces look like? It's not a nice, clean, predictable process. The outcome might actually be undeterminable. I mean, may well come to an answer which is, well, we simply don't know. Or, probably not. We're 80% sure that we haven't seen this. But if you keep doing this, sooner or later you will find something which is interesting and something which is worthy of further investigation and identify something significant. What we really want our analysts to continuously ask is these questions: what if? What if this happened? What would it look like? What else might be happening? And make this a process of introspection and continuing asking of the data, what else? What might be happening? What might I be seeing? How do I find this within the data? When we come across new ways of asking questions of our data and looking for outliers and modeling it and finding it, this is the type of thing that when we get a success, we can turn this into an automated procedure. This kind of world is perfect for machines to operate. This is not what you want your people to be doing. This is a waste of human resources, of that ingenuity, of that professionalism, of the sense of a hunt that you want to create within a threat hunting team. This is the type of thing that you want your threat hunters doing. Asking questions, thinking, what if, what else, what might be happening, what might this look like? So what I really, really don't want you to do is to create an assembly line. You know, the 20th century way of working, where we have people on very, very tightly defined work and responsibilities, conducting repetitive tasks, following tightly defined procedures which are chiseled in stone, which have never changed. For a manager, it's great because it's really, really easy to measure and reward. We look at the people that are performing these procedures the fastest. So how many firewall alerts did you resolve today? You know, oh wow, I resolved my firewall alerts in less than 5 minutes each. You know, why? Why are you doing this? It makes no sense. What we want is to create a 21st century way of working, which is a very, very different way of doing things. We need people to collaborate and share ideas and come up with new ways of doing things, new questions that they can ask of the data, new ways of modeling it, new ways of searching for things, and be very, very open to new ideas and cultivating that. To get to that point, we need to be oriented around a goal, not how many firewall alerts have you resolved in a day, not how many tickets have you closed, but how have you actually contributed to what it is that we are trying to do. And this is the outcome that we will measure. The key thing to remember about being innovative and trying to do new things, you will mostly fail. Most times you will get it wrong and you will just find nothing. But that's actually what you need to do. We need to go through many, many ideas of trying out new ideas again and again and again until we find something that works. But that's great. This is what we've got to do. Have lots of ideas, recognize that most of them aren't going to work, but never mind, that's fine. We'll just fail fast, fail early, and move on. Not invest too much of our own selves in our ideas, but just try them out, see if it works. If it looks interesting, brilliant, let's keep going. But actually, most of them, they're probably not going to work, but that's fine. In our own team, what this actually looks like, and I spent ages searching for a stock photo that would illustrate our way of working, and yeah, mostly it looks like this. It's a bloke on his sofa with his dogs and a laptop. Within the European team, we all work remotely. We all work from home. And yeah, this is a very, very similar way to the way that I work. But for us, this works very, very well indeed. And the key things that I think means that we are successful is that we have a very, very strong sense of mission of what it is that we're trying to do. We're the team that hunts down the bad guys on the internet. We find them first. We protect the internet. This is a very, very strong sense of what it is that we're trying to do. And that strong sense of mission itself drives a very high degree of self-motivation. That itself also drives lots and lots of peer collaboration because people want to find things. They want to hunt. They want to find it first. Got a hunger to fulfill our mission, to work together across the team, keep that motivation high, even though we're all working remotely and we're collaborating over remote working systems, and encouraging each other to keep going and keep looking. What do you think of this? What if we tried that? And it turns out and it becomes that actually what we do, it's not really a job, it's actually a lifestyle. And that works because we can build in a lot of flexibility into the way that we work. If you want to take your dogs to the vets in the middle of the day, that's fine. You want to collect your children from school, absolutely fine, because I know that come 6, 7, 8 p.m. at night and on the weekends, you're still going to have that hunger because you want to know what your scripts are finding, what are the bad guys doing, what are they looking for. So for us, this works very, very well indeed. But Brian, as you said, it's all about passion. It's all about having the passion. It's all about wanting to make the difference and wanting to hunt down the bad guys. So if I take Sea Turtle as an example, obviously Earl and Edmund went into this in much more detail technically, but I think it's interesting to look more at the process and the environment in which this happened. So it did all start with this taunt. We have someone making fun of us on the internet? No way. Fucker. Hunt him down. So clearly, we want to find this threat actor, and he's taunting us. We want to put a stop to this. We want to find his malware. Very interesting that he's conducting command and control over DNS. That's interesting. We don't often see that. So what we want to do is find more malware conducting command and control over DNS. So we'll set up various rules. We'll look for malware such as that. We know what it is, what questions we want to ask the data. Show me more malware which is conducting research using DNS. And ultimately, this brings us to this document, the one that Earl presented that has the 2 macros in it. Here we have a piece of malware which is conducting command and control traffic over DNS. Brilliant. First question that you want to ask, well, what is the server, the IP address that it's communicating with? So we find these IP addresses, and then that first question that we want our analysts to ask is, well, what else is happening? What else is going on? And this is the point that we have that moment when we look in the passive DNS and we actually see the webmail.governmental domain had been pointed at one of the IP addresses that was being used as command and control. So here we have our evidence. This is actually quite significant. There's probably been a DNS redirection attack happening here. Something has clearly gone wrong, that we've had a legitimate, very high reputation domain which somehow has pointed at this IP address which we know is being used as part of a malicious campaign. So here again, we want that to spark off that reflection. Well, what else is happening? What if? What else is going on? Which leads us to look into more detail, and we find these range of domains that are being redirected. We also identify, again, what else might be happening? What else might we be seeing? And we find domain-validated, entirely valid TLS certificates in public registries that have been issued for these domains where we've seen the IP address changed maliciously at the same time. So clearly this looks very, very much like someone is doing some kind of man-in-the-middle or certainly an impersonation attack. For us, well, the first thing we want to do is we want to share this. We want people to be aware that this is happening. So we passed that dissemination part of the process. We publish our findings with those indicators of compromise in there. And what we like to think are happening is across the world, people are reading our reports and are taking action. And certainly we did see action coming out of this. We saw a lot of interest within the press, a lot of reports being written about it. Clearly, lots of other people were thinking about what it is that we'd found and were looking at their own systems and their own data for more of this. This led to the Department of Homeland Security in the US issuing this emergency directive for US agencies to audit their own DNS information. And for us, this is like really, really interesting, because this is kind of suggesting that there's more going on than we might initially be seeing. Also, the fact that we've been very, very open about this and saying, look, we're seeing this, led to further intelligence coming to us and people sharing information with us, which allowed us to then put together what was the full picture of what was happening, identified that actually we had two different DNS redirection campaigns going on, and this one with Sea Turtle being conducted almost certainly by a previously unknown nation-state threat actor. Very, very significant stuff. If we look at about the steps that led us to this, it's actually mostly about engagement. Well, firstly, we've got that community engagement of someone tweeting us a malware that they thought would interest us. Okay, that's great. This is us being part of the community. We want people to be part of the community and to share things and to people to tell us information that they think might be of interest to us. The fact that it had that Taunt, very interesting observation, command and control over DNS, that's interesting. We want to find more of this. So we set up these automated processes that are going out and looking for more of this kind of malware, which brings us to this HR document, this job recruiting document that was conducting that command and control over DNS. And then we've got that very, very interesting observation. We've got a governmental domain which is sharing DNS with this malicious IP address. That leads us to reflect, well, what else might be happening here? How else might we find more evidence of this attack within the data? We then publish it. Again, we've got that piece of community engagement, of people sharing information with us, which allows us to do more research, which allows us to identify the full picture. There are very, very few tools in this. There isn't a SIEM in sight. There is lots and lots of engagement and actually little in the way of tools. This is mostly people being people and communicating and being innovative and having good ideas and trying them out and wanting to get to the bottom of the story. So how do you go about threat hunting, and what advice can I give you? The first thing that people tend to think of when we mention threat hunting is, yeah, it's dead easy. You just want a SIEM and then you go on the dark web. Right, I get a lot of this. A SIEM is a really good place to start. At least it makes you think about the data that you might have, how you might access that, and how you might visualize it. The great danger with the SIEM solutions is they're on rails, that they will show your analysts only one view of what's happening out there and actually make it difficult to ask different and innovative questions of the data. I had a very, very good example of this the other day. I was talking to someone who wanted to start up a threat hunting system, and he wanted to know what would an intrusion look like in his network if somebody compromised the laptops. And so he went to his threat hunting team. What would this look like If someone compromised a laptop, how would you find this? And their response was, well, the desktop protection would flag and we'd see the light go off in our SIEM. And you're like, guys, no, this is not the way of doing it. What if it was a successful intrusion that didn't trigger your desktop protection? What would that look like? These are the questions that you want to ask. That's how you're going to find the new stuff. As with the dark web, there's all sorts of malicious activity happening in the dark web. Again, I talked to someone a few weeks ago who was really buzzing about researching in the dark web and told me that, it was absolutely what you need to do because you can find the bad guys discussing the denial of service attacks that they're going to do on your network before they happen, which is great, and he's not wrong. However, when you look at the set of things that actually happen, and the things that are discussed on the dark web, some of the things that are discussed on the dark web actually do go on and happen, but a lot of it, it can just be noise. Just people discussing things, and what they're discussing might not actually happen. And equally, if they're talking about this brand new super cyber weapon that they've developed that they're going to make for sale on the dark web, the threat actors that are actually coming up with these new cyber weapons, WannaCry, not mentioned on the dark web, not discussed on the dark web, not Petya, not discussed on the dark web, Sea Turtle, not on the dark web. So, in fact, when we look at the things that you actually need to worry about and concern yourself about, these are certainly the things that happen, but that overlap with the things that are happening on the dark web might be smaller than you think. So the first place that I'd start in terms of that strategy is, what is it that you are hoping to find? What would you like to find in your environment? And then what would you do with this once you've found it? How will that improve your security posture and the goals of your organization? Another question to ask, are there actually better things to do? Would you be better off having a larger and better resource team which is doing patching or sorting out user authentication rather than spending your time looking for advanced threats within your network? It's a key question to start with. Threat hunting isn't necessarily what it is that you should be doing. It's great if you've got the maturity that you think this is going to be a useful addition, but there may well be other things that you might want to consider doing first. The key bit for me is the culture. We want to enable the team to hunt. That will mean you will have long periods where nothing is happening, when you're finding nothing, when all your ideas are failing. That is actually a good sign. You need to encourage that. You need to keep people supported and motivated. We want lots of ideas. We want to know that it'll take a long time to find the bad guys. When we do find them, it's probably going to take a long time to understand what's actually happening. This is a good thing. We don't want to build that assembly line where we're very tightly controlling what people are doing so that we can measure it, so that we can report on it, so that we know that they're following procedures. Checklists have their place, but where we are in the internet at the moment, we don't necessarily know what those checklists are. We're still in the discovery mode. We need to find out how we identify the bad guys, not necessarily following prescribed wisdom that may have been developed 4 or 5 years ago. Great for finding the threats 4 or 5 years ago, not necessarily relevant now. And then that big piece, it's all about human connections. Getting people to work together, getting people to share ideas, share information, working together to solve the problem. People, key bit. We want a mix of both technical skills, people able to do malware analysis, software engineering skills so they can write the tools or work the tools differently, and also data skills, thinking about the data that we've got. How do we model it? How do we find what's unusual? How do we define unusual? Being able to think of what questions we can ask, how might we be able to uncover the unusual within the data that we have. And I think a lot of that really is driven by curiosity. I think the key thing that we should be hiring for within threat intelligence and threat hunting is people who are really, really curious about things, who like asking difficult questions and really getting to the root cause of what's going on. Tools, your sales guys will tell you this is the most important bit. No, not at all. It's all about what questions can I ask the data and how easy is it to ask them. You do not need an all-singing, all-dancing data system to find things. Quite the opposite. You need easy ways to ask questions of the data rather than relying on a vendor showing you exactly what they want you to see and only what they want you to see. And then that data bit, yeah, you need some kind of data. Often it's driven actually what can you get access to and what is being collected. It's never going to be perfect. That's fine. Just accept what it is that you can get. Doesn't have to be all internal. External sources are very, very good indeed. And for goodness sake, don't store everything. Think about what data would actually be useful to you and for how long would that be useful. Storing every single log within your system for 5 years probably won't be helpful to you. But what happened yesterday might be very, very useful. But again, think about the sort of signal to noise ratio. What might you be able to find in the data that you have access to and which you can actually meaningfully store? So to wrap it up, I mean, really the key point, if you want to build a threat hunting team, just empower people to hunt threats. That's it. You become a threat hunter by hunting threats, and you do that in an environment that empowers people to get on with it and do it and enjoy it and get rewarded for it. And with that, I will thank you very, very much indeed for listening to me, and both open up for questions now, or also if you want to come and chat to us on the booth, we'd be delighted to talk to you in more detail. Thank you.